All right, I will say good morning. The great Zichos Meir Hashem today to continue Maseches Nazir. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat, Mrs. Bracha Strimber for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drashos this month in memory of her husband Avram Ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi Zichron Livracha. To thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drashos this month in the Schusur of Shlema for Shulamis Bas Susha, and to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Baruch Gold, in memory of his father Shasor Rafal Ben Avram Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, and all those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. With that, let us begin. Today's daf is Daf Zayin. Incredible daf ahead of us today. Says the Mishnah. Really some very interesting cases, some interesting Rambams. We have a lot to do today. Alright, says the Mishnah. Amar Harini Nazir Achos Gidola, Harini Nazir Achos Kitana. So I'll say interesting cases. Remember again, we've been focusing on the concept. We've already established in the last sugya, Machlokes Rav Masna and Bar Pada, about the minimum shear of Nazirus. Right, Stam Nazirus is going to be 30 days. Machlokes Bar Pada Rav Masna, does that mean active 30 days and then Karbanos day 31? Does it mean 29 active days, Karbanos day 30? So we established yesterday that Rambam Paskin is like Rav Masna, namely again 30 days. 30 days of active Nazirus, and then concluding sacrificial rites come sometime after that. So we'll say, so now we're going to speak about some interesting formulations. Let's say a guy says, Harini Nazir Achos Gidola. I am a Nazir for one period of a long time, or one long period, right? Or Harini Nazir Achas Kitana, or I'll be a Nazir for one short period of time. So what happens? Afilu mikan vatsofa olam. Let's say a person says, I'm going to be a Nazir from now until the end of the world. So what's the halacha? Nazir shloshim yom. He is only a Nazir for 30 days. Okay, so let's analyze this a little bit. So I will say, so the truth is, the first case and the second case are not all that problematic. Okay, guy says, I'm going to be a Nazir for a long time, I'm going to be a Nazir for a short time. I don't know what a long time means. I don't know what a short time means. So again, therefore, what the Mishnah seems to be telling me is, in the absence of a specific time frame longer than 30 days, you're just the automatic default is you're a Nazir for 30 days. The intriguing case is I'm going to be a Nazir from now until the end of the world. Right? So what does that mean? What does that mean? So why would I only be a Nazir for 30 days if I say I'm a Nazir from now till the end of the world? We'll say from the end of the world sounds like a pretty long time. Haki Kamar. What's this incredible? That's what he means to say. Aricha li hadam milsa kimikan vat sofa olam. He'll say what he's saying is, in reality, I'm only becoming a Nazir for 30 days. But being a Nazir for 30 days feels as long for me from now until the end of the world. So I will say, so it's incredible. The way we're interpreting his statement when he says, I'm a Nazir from now until the end of the world is essentially, he's telling us he's a Nazir for 30 days, but he's describing to us what this experience means to him. Right? For me, becoming a Nazir for 30 days is as if this experience is lasting until the end of the world. Which Rabbi say is fascinating. We're going to see essentially the idea that Chazal are trying to express is, if you don't articulate a specific amount of time, our default is going to be 30 days. And we're simply going to reinterpret your words as meaning something else. Incredible. So Tanan, Harini Nazir Mekan Ad Makom Ploni was another case. Listen to this. I'm a Nazir from here until I get to a certain place. So I'll say this is actually interesting. We're going to see this is in tomorrow's daf. This is a Mishnah. Harini Nazir Mekan Ad Makom Ploni. I'm a Nazir. We're both say literally translated from here until so and so place. Okay. So what's the halacha? Omdim kama yamim mikan v'ad makom ploni. So we'll say, so let's say a person says, I'm a Nazir from here until New York. From here until New York. Okay, so what do? We look at how many days would it take a person to travel from here until New York. So what's the halacha? Pachus mishloshim yom. If it's less than 30 days from here to New York, then what? Nazir shloshim yom. Because we won't say again, that goes back to what we said before, which is what? Halacha l'maisa, you can't become a Nazir for less than 30 days. So if it's less than 30 days from here until New York, so okay, fine, that's a neder nazirus for 30 days. Ve'im lav, but if it's more than 30 days, nazir kiminyan hayamim. Ultimately, again, I'll become a nazir in accordance with the days that it takes to travel from here until New York. But I don't understand. We'll say, so watch the contrast. According to the Mishnah, if I say Hareini Nazir mikan va'ad sof ha'olam, from here until the end of the world, so what's the halacha? 30 days. What do you do with that phrase? That becomes a descriptive phrase about how I'm feeling about my neder nazirus. That it's only 30 days, but for me it feels as if it's from now until the end of the world. So contrast that. I say I'm a nazir from here until New York. So now, Bosai, we're not looking at that as a descriptive phrase. What are we looking at? What are we looking at that as? An actual definition of the neder. So if it's more than 30 days from here till New York, then I'll be a nazir for that duration. Less than 30 days, I'm nazir for 30 days. Why do we interpret it the same way? And why do we interpret it that when I say I'm a nazir from here until New York, what I'm really saying is this neder nazirus feels as long for me as the trip from here until New York. So the Gemara says, to which the Gemara says, Amarava shehechsik baderech. Very interesting, I will say. What's the case? The case is where I'm traveling to New York. That's the case. The case, Joe says, I'm in the middle of a journey, or on a journey, and we're all on a journey, but here literally again, I'm actually on a journey to a different location, and I go ahead and I say, I should be a nazir, I am a nazir, mikan vad makoploni. So I'll say, so because I'm actively journeying, right, I'm engaged in this journey, so we understand the neder to actually be tied to the duration of the journey. Shehechsik baderech. Fine. V'lehavi kol parso parsa. So we'll say if that's the case, that's actually very interesting. So why don't we say that maybe every parsa I travel. In other words, so now we'll say, so let's kind of put this together. So now I'm taking a neder nazirus. Well, actually, step one, I'm traveling to New York, right? Step two, I say I'm hereby become a nazir mikan va'ad makom ploni, from here until New York. From here until New York. So we'll say, so now what's the halacha? So now I'm going to go, so now the Gemara says, if the journey is less than 30 days, I'm a nazir for 30 days. If it's more than 30 days, then I'm a nazir for the duration. We'll say, by the way, we're going to get to this, but I just want to point out, so as much as we said that there's no naziros for less than 30 days, you can be a nazir for more than 30 days, and it doesn't have to go in increments of 30. So for example, if the trip from here to New York is 32 days, I'm a nazir for 32 days. In other words, the floor is 30. But once you get above 30, it doesn't have to go in increments of 30 after that. Okay, we're actually going to say that's the next Mishnah. So we'll say, so now watch this. So now what we're saying is, so now I'm traveling from Baltimore to New York, and I say, mikan va'ad makom ploni. So now we'll say, so now the halacha is, we look at the duration of the journey. Less than 30 days, my neder nazirus says 30 days. More than 30 days, my neder nazirus says the amount of the journey. Why don't we say like this? Why don't we say that for every parsa of the journey, that generates a new neder nazirus? In other words, how do you know that the neder nazirus is linked to the entirety of the journey? Maybe every unit of the journey generates its own new neder nazirus. So for every parsa, there's another 30 days. To which the Gemara says, Amra Papa, Ba'asra de lo mani parsi. Talk about a place where they don't count distance by parsos. Fine. V'lehavi kol avna va'avna. So I'll say, so look, the assumption is that when you're traveling a long distance, you're not traveling it in one clip. Let every night, or every night, so the assumption is you're checking into an inn, right? You're staying over every night somewhere. Let every night be counted as another unit, and every night be considered another 30-day neder nazirus. They both say, take a look at the Rush for just a moment. The Rush says over here, Lahavi kol avna. Second line, Lahavi kol avna va'avna. Chad nazir, dinehidal manu parsi, mikol makom, manu shir mahalech hayamim, V'nimtza shekibel alav naziros k'min hayomim. So what says Avnu is like literally every single night that I stop over somewhere, let every night that I lodge somewhere be counted as one neder naziros. To which the Gemara said, Milo Tanan, did we not learn? Harini Nazir ki afar haaretz. There was a very interesting cases. Let's say a guy says, I'm going to be a Nazir like the dust on the earth. Also tomorrow's daf. I'm going to be a Nazir like the dust on the earth, or kisear roshi, or like the hairs on my head. So we'll say, finally, I have an advantage, right, over all of you hair people, right? So I'll say, so now watch this, so listen to this, right? So I make a neder, I should be a Nazir like the hairs on my head, or kichol hayam, or like the granules of sand. Thank you. Hare ze Nazir olam. They will say this person is an eternal Nazir, a Nazir olam. Umegaleach echad l'shloshim yom. And ultimately, again, remember again, we saw this already in Shabbos' daf. Difference between a Nazir Olam, right? A Nazir Olam which is a Nazir forever, has the ability to cut his hair once every 30 days. I should say cut his hair, lighten his hair, right? Lighten his hair. Once every 30 days. So we'll say, so what's going on over here? So now we're contrasting is like this. First of all, there's like a double kasha over here. So we'll say, so now what we have over here is, I'm making a neder, that Harini Nazir mikan ad makom ploni. So what did we say? How do we look at that? And how do we look at that neder nazirus? Now remember again. Now halacha l'maisa, we're assuming I'm making this neder when I'm in the middle. I'm journeying already. So now we literally look at, I'm linking the duration of my neder nazirus to the duration of the journey. So no problem. If the journey is more than 30 days, then I'm a nazir for that amount of time. Less than 30 days, I'm a nazir for 30 days. I don't understand why. Why don't we look at that every unit of the journey, however you're going to define units, parsos or nights that you lodge, whatever it is, why do we look at every unit of the journey as triggering its own neder nazirus? After all, compared to the following case, I am a nazir like the dust of the earth. I am the nazir like the sand, right? The sand by the ocean. I am a nazir like the hairs on my head. They will say, what does that do? That makes me a Nazir Olam. Because what we're assuming is what? Every hair becomes essentially its own neder nazirus. Every granule of dirt. So we'll say, so you see that when you link a neder nazirus to something longer, it becomes almost self-perpetuating cycles of nazirus based on the individual units. So same idea. When I'm traveling from here to here, I say, Hareini Nazir mekan vad makom ploni, let every unit of the journey trigger its own independent neder nazirus. To which the Gemara says is incredible. Kol milsa de ispe kitzusa lo katani. We'll say we're not including in the Mishnah anything that has a defined amount. Now we'll say take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Actually, first look at the Rush. So we'll say the Rush is in not the widest lines, but the intermediate wide lines, 4 lines in. We'll say Rush is on the bottom left-hand corner of your page. Right? Kol milsa de isle kitzusa, the Rush says, davar sheyish lo kitzva. Anything, I will say, that has an established amount. So the Rush says, kimo mikal v'makom ploni. Right? For example, from here until New York, lo amrinon sheikabel alav naziros kamin hayamim shemikal ad masa oros makom. So I will say, here's the difference. When you see harini nazir mikan v'ad makom ploni, I will say that is a defined amount. That's what we call ispe kitzusa, right? It's quantifiable. Whenever you link your duration of nazirus, or whenever you link your nazirus to something quantifiable, I will say the way we view that is one standard duration of nazirus linked to the quantifiability of the item articulated. So therefore, again, if I say Harini Nazir Mekama Mokom Ploni, I'm saying it's one neder nazirus. What's the duration of the neder nazirus? What's the duration? The length of the journey, with a minimum, of course, for the floor of 30 days. Finish the Rush. Aval seyar va'afar v'chol. But hair, dirt, sand, davar she'in lo kitzva, which are things that cannot be quantified. Ein lomar she'ikabel alav nazirus echad kiminyanon. They both say it doesn't make sense that you're taking on one duration of nazirus. Why can't you be taking on one duration of nazirus, one neder nazirus with a specific duration? Why? because you don't know how long the duration goes for. So I said, this is fascinating. So what the Gemara is saying is like this. When you link your Neder Nazirus to something quantifiable, we assume that what you're doing over here is undertaking one Neder Nazirus with a duration connected to the quantifiable duration of the item articulated. When you link your Neder Nazirus to something that is not quantifiable, so I'll say, so what do we do? This is incredible. What do? We assume that you're taking on multiple 30-day Nidrei Nazirus. Isn't that fascinating? So when you say, I should be a Nazir like the hairs on my head, how many hairs do I have in my head? I don't know. It's not quantifiable. Or it's quantifiable, I guess, if you spend however much time going through each and every hair. But Lamaisa, what I'm doing over here is I'm taking on multiple 30-day Nidrei Nazirus, corresponding ultimately to the hairs on my head, to the dust on the earth, to the sand by the ocean. But here it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So the Rosh continues, he says, Geila minyan, hilchach vadei chiluk nazir yeshkan l'chol echa nazirus. Because I can't quantify those things, I must be taking on individual 30-day nidrei nazirus, corresponding ultimately again to the particular items articulated. So you hear this distinction? So when you say, because it's fascinating, mikan va'ad makom ploni, hareini nazir, mikan va'ad makom ploni. They will say, is that quantifiable? Absolutely. What we call in the Gemara ispe kitzusa, it's quantifiable. Well, if it's quantifiable, then really what I'm doing is I'm making one neder nazirus with a quantifiable duration. I say, harini nazir, I am a nazir like the hairs on my head, like the dust on the earth, like the sand by the ocean. Now let's say, unquantifiable. So what do I do with that? If it's unquantifiable, what I'm doing is, I'm taking on repeated 30-day nidrei nazirus. So now I'm going to be on a constant cycle of 30-day nidrei nazirus for the rest of my life. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, good, Vatanya, but we learned, Harini Nazir kol yimei chayai. If a person says, I'm going to be a Nazir all the days of my life, or Harini Nazir olam, or I'm going to be a Nazir forever, what's the halacha? Harei zet Nazir olam. Person like this is a Nazir forever. Afilu meya shana, afilu elef shanim. Now we'll say, now this is interesting. Let's say a person says, I'm going to be a Nazir for 100 years. Or I'm going to be a Nazir for 1,000 years. Ein ze Nazir olam. They will say, this is not a Nazir olam, ella Nazir le'olam. Rather, a Nazir forever. Now, both say, we already began to touch on this. There's a very big difference between a Nazir olam and a Nazir le'olam. We'll say Nazir olam is a specific type of Nazir, right? Who is a person who's Nazir for the rest of his life, and he has certain built-in leniencies, right? Which is that Allah Lamaisa, every once in a while he has the ability to lighten the load of his hair. A person who becomes a Nazir la'olam, a Nazir forever, does not have those same type of leniencies. Again, we will in Yirtzeh Hashem get into this as well. But I will say, take a look at the Rush once more. I'm sorry, I know that the print is so small. I apologize. So the Rush says over here, the Rush says, Vatanya b'nichusa, harin Nazir. So I just want to point out, this price is being brought as a proof, right? As a proof that when you go ahead and you make an Neder Naziros, and you link it to something unquantifiable, right? So kol yimei chayai, right? Or nazir olam, right? So I'll say, so again, these are quote unquote unquantifiable. You don't know how long you're going to live, right? So therefore, what's the halacha? The halacha is, well, actually, let's look at the Rush. So v'atayim b'nichuz, harini nazir kol yimei chayai, harini nazir olam, hareiz and nazir olam. So bein shamar harini nazir kol yimei chayai, bein shamar nazir olam, hu nazir olam umekel batar, umevi karban mishum deles lekitzusa. So we'll say, here's a perfect example. These are unquantifiable items. So because they are unquantifiable, you become a nazir olam. Well, as a nazir olam, you have certain leniencies. Namely, you're able to go ahead and lighten the load of your hair. On the flip side, kuf shano elef shanim, you say you're going to be a Nazir for 100 years or 1,000 years, the Rush says, afagav, dulo yarich kokach, even though, of course, you're not going to live that long, nevertheless, kivan de'isle kitzusa, hu Nazir le'olam, ve'eno megaleach kol yimei chayav, so we'll say, so the Gemara is just bringing this price to back up this distinction. So we'll say, now we're coming out with something really fascinating. There is a distinction between linking your neder and naziros to something quantifiable versus something unquantifiable. When you link your neder and naziros to something quantifiable, the way we understand the neder is one neder with a protracted duration. You link your neder and naziros to something unquantifiable. What are you doing? Multiple independent 30-day nidre naziros, but again, on an ongoing cycle linked to that unquantifiable thing. Everyone say, what's the distinction between the two? One is called a Nazir Olam, and one is called a Nazir Le'olam. A Nazir Olam is a specific type of Nazirite vow that goes forever. That type of Naziros has a built-in leniency, namely, every 30 days you could lighten the load of your hair, so to speak. A Nazir Le'olam is just someone who is stuck in an ongoing cycle of repeating Nidre Naziros. For that person, there are no built-in leniencies to lighten their hair. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rabba says, shiny saros. It could very well be that the hair case is different. Why? Hoil umuvdalos zumizu. The Gemara says it's interesting. Maybe the reason by the hair, why we look at it, that a person is taking on multiple 30-day nidre nazirus, corresponding to the number of hairs on his head, is why? Because they're independent from one another. See, I will say, what you're doing is you are linking. See, as much as you say you're a nazir like the hairs on your head, I will say each hair is independent. So because each hair is independent, therefore what? Each hair generates its own 30-day neder naziros. The Gemara says, 1 second, Gabe Yomi nami ksiv vayer vayvoker yom echad. So 1 second, but by days, I can say the same thing. In other words, I will say, if I say Harini Nazir mikan van makom ploni, right, from here until I get to New York, well, it's going to take me whatever number of days. Each day is also its own independent unit. If that's the case, I should say that what? Each day generates its own independent 30-day neder naziros. Hasam lav demifsiki mehadadiho. So it says very interesting. Each day is not separate and distinct from the other. Meaning what Rabbi say, "My ka'amar yimama v'layla chad yomahu uli olam lo mafsiki mehadadi." Rabbi say, this is fascinating. Time is a continuum. So because time is a continuum, each day is absolutely connected to the next. So I will say, this is one of the interesting things. One of the interesting things that if you think about one of the chidushim of tshuva, right? One of the incredible novelties about tshuva is that a person has the ability to change the trajectory of their lives. Now, what's the pshad? See, the havamina is you shouldn't be able to. What's the Gemara saying over here? Time is a continuum. Time flows. Well, if time flows, then once it's flowing in a particular direction, logic would say that's what? You can't change the flow. So I will say, Rav Kook brings down this idea, Rav Shmuel Silber and Oros Tshuva brings down that tshuva is lamala min hazman. Tshuva is above time. It's above time. I was wondering, what does it mean that tshuva is above time? What does that mean? So, of course, on a basic level, what Rav Kook was talking about is the idea, like the Gemara Maseches Yuma says, that tshuva has the ability to transform your actions of the past into something else, right? Like the Gemara says, certain types of tshuva could take intentional averos and transform them into unintentional averos. And higher forms of tshuva even have the ability to transform past averos into mitzvos. Well, how do you transform the past? Because tshuva is lamala min azman. But I will say, even on a simpler level, you see, human nature, we often tell ourselves, either consciously or subconsciously, that once I am a certain kind of way, that's the way I'm going to remain. Right? Because time is a flow. Time is a continuum. So once I've carved out a certain identity as to who I am, this is it, love it or leave it, right? This is who I am. And I will say, what Tshuva says is, even though time is a continuum, Tshuva is l'mala min azman. Tshuva has the ability to stop the flow of time and to say, no, this is who I was up until now, but now going forward, I choose to be someone fundamentally different. Rabbi say, that's the chiddush of this Gemara. Days and nights are not separate from each other. They're all one clump, right? One continuum of time. We'll say, isn't that the gadlus of tshuva? That you could stop the flow of time and decide to be someone different going forward. If at 6:24 a.m. on a Monday morning, I decide, Masha haya haya, what was, and now in this moment going forward, I am someone different. I stop the flow of time, and from this moment forward, become someone dramatically different. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. All on Nazir, Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, incredible. So what says the Gemara says as follows. So I'm at Olam Lomevski Ba'adavi. But at least when it comes to Nedarim, time is a continuum. Time flows, and therefore we do not view days as separate from each other. And I will say, so that's between days and hairs, right? Every hair like has its own pore, right? Every follicle is independent of anything else. So therefore, when you go ahead and you make a neder nazirus, like the hairs on your head, you're linking each neder to a different strand of hair, and therefore it creates multiple 30-day neder nazirus. Masha'inki, when you link your neder nazirus bikan ad makom ploni, days are one continuum, and therefore Allah Chalamaysa, it's one neder nazirus with a protracted duration. Rava Amarava says, Lama lecha akshiyei kulehai. Why do you have to go ahead and have such kashas? Shaini hasam dahakatani harini nazir achas. So I'll say this is incredible. So Rava says, I don't understand why everyone is getting all excited. I will say the case of the Gemara of harini nazir mikan val makom ploni. Rava says is a case of harini nazir achas mikan val makom ploni. Oh. It's like, why didn't he say that in the beginning, right? In other words, right, let's say, wow, how much, in other words, so that's the case. In other words, so the case ultimately is where he's actively articulating, I'm taking on one duration of Naziros from here until this place. So obviously, again, I will say, if you articulate it that way, that fundamentally changes everything. So I will say, so therefore, again, I'll just point out the Rambam paskins as follows. So first of all, I will say, what I will just point out is, before we get to the halacha l'maisa, a very interesting concept emerges from here, which is the notion of going ahead and linking a neder nazirus to something de'is beikitzusa versus to less beikitzusa. Linking your neder nazirus to something quantifiable versus unquantifiable. If it's quantifiable, first of all, again, the Gemara says, what that seems to do is create multiple 30-day nidrei nazirus, versus unquantifiable. I'm sorry, just the opposite. So it's right, actually, let's see the Rambam. Rambam's going to say it better than me. We'll say, Parak Gimel, Halacha Hey. Parak Gimel, of Hilchos Halacha Hey. Here's the case, let's start with the case in Mishnah. Haomer, Harini Nazir Mikan Ramakom Ploni. We'll say, this is our case. Actually, the truth is, this is not the case in the Mishnah. This is the case of the Gemara. So Harini Nazir Mikan Ad Makom Ploni. I'm a Nazir from here until I get to a particular destination. Imlo hichsik baderech. So what's the distinction of the Gemara? If you did not start the journey, hare ze nazir shloshim yom bilvad. You're a nazir for 30 days. So it's interesting. So I say I'm a nazir from here till New York. If I did not start the journey, we look at that as a regular neder naziris for 30 days. Shelo niskaven ela nazirus gedola bahari lo perish zman. Im hichsik baderech. Now I will say if halacha l'maisa, I started journeying, right? Then I will say, then what does it depend on? It depends on the duration of the journey. If it's a journey ultimately, again, of less than 30 days, then ultimately, again, I'm a Nazir for 30 days. More than 30 days, ultimately, again, I am a Nazir for the duration of the journey itself. Good. So I will say, actually, we're going to leave the rest of the cases out of the Rambam because the cases that the Rambam quote, the cases that the Gemara quoted over here, are actually all Mishnayos of their own. So we'll see their respective halachas when we get to the Mishnayos. Beautiful. We'll say Mishnah, bottom of Zayin Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Harini Nazir v'yom echad. Interesting case. I am a Nazir and one day. I'm a Nazir and one day, right? Harini Nazir v'yom echad. Harini Nazir v'sha'achas. I'm a Nazir and 1 hour. Harini Nazir achas u'mechza. I'm a Nazir for one duration and a half. What's talacha? Hare ze Nazir shtayim. You're a Nazir for 2 periods of time, two 30-day intervals. So I'll say, so really, really very interesting, right? So in other words, I say I'm a Nazir Right, Harini Nazir v'yom echad. I'm a Nazir and one day. So again, I will say, remember, essentially what we're saying is the minimum duration of Naziros is 30 days. So once you say, I am a Nazir and one day, the way we're interpreting that statement, I will say, is how? Harini Nazir is what? 30 days. And Yom Echad means I'm taking upon myself a second period of Naziros. Now, the way I'm articulating it is, I'm taking on myself a second period of Naziros for one day. There's only one problem, which is, there's no Naziros for one day. Therefore, once you've taken on a second period of Naziros for one day, or for 1 hour, for that matter, you've effectively taken on another period of Naziros. Says the Gemara, Lama li lemisnei kol hani. The truth is, I got it. Why do you have to give all of these examples, right? I'm a Nazir and for one day. I'm a Nazir for 1 hour. I'm a Nazir and a half. I got it. In other words, once you say you're a Nazir, and then you add on something else, whatever this something else is, 1 day, 1 hour, 1 half, that once you accept a second period of Naziros, you are a Nazir for another 30 days. Why do you have to illustrate it with 3 different examples? I'll tell you why, says the Gemara. Tzvichi, di tana harini Nazir v'yom echad. If it would have just said, I'm a Nazir and one day, hachu darminan ein Naziris liyom echad. Kamani tartin. So say you can't be Nazir for 1 day. So once you said 1 day automatically means the second Neder Nazir is for 30 days. Aval, harini Nazir v'shach. As a person says, I am a Nazir, and for 1 hour, limni lamid ve'echad yom. Maybe I will say that means it's a 31-day Naziros. Right? 31-day Naziros. Kamash Malon, no. Kamash Malon will say no, that even if he says, I am a Nazir, and for 1 hour, that 1 hour triggers a second Neder Naziros for 30 days. V'tana sha'achos. And if we're just at the case of 1 hour, mishum delo nochis ledafka, because ultimately he's not being specific. Aval achosu mechza, the nochis ledafka, ema lo nimni tarti. So say, when a guy says, harini Nazir, I am a Nazir, v'sha'achos, and 1 hour. What does that mean? What does that mean, 1 hour? Right? In other words, I will say, remember, everyone's agreeing, there's no such concept as what? As like a limited, you know what? I feel like dabbling in the Naziros for a little bit. So, let me take it on for a couple of hours, right? I'll be a Nazir from Musaf on Shabbos. But I would say, for some people, being a Nazir during Musaf on Shabbos would actually be an accomplishment. And I would say, but Lamaisa, right? But the Gemara says, so there's no such concept like that. So I would have said, where a person is so unspecific, right? So that's when it triggers a second Neder Naziros. But let's say a guy says, when he says, I'm going to be a Nazir for a Nazir and a half. I will say, Nazir and a half is pretty specific, right? What does Nazir and a half mean? 1 period of 30 days and what? 1 period of 15 days. That's pretty specific. I would have thought that should work. Kamash Malon Kulu Nazir Shtayim. Say, Rabbi say, what this Mishnah is teaching me is also something very interesting. That the moment you become a Nazir, you say a Nazir, I'm Harini Nazir, v'yom echad. Harini Nazir, v'sha'achos. Harini Nazir, umechza. Once you go ahead and you get into that second duration, you are now a Nazir for the entirety of that second duration as well. Great. Now both say, watch the next Mishnah. Look at the contrast. Harini Nazir shloshim yom v'sha'achos. So also now watch this. In this case over here, a person says, Harini Nazir, I am a Nazir for 30 days and 1 hour. 30 days and 1 hour. Or Nazir shloshim ve'echad yom, or I'm a Nazir for 31 days. Harini Nazir shloshim v'sha'achos, Nazir shloshim ve'echad yom. So I read that wrong. Person who says, I am a Nazir for 30 days and 1 hour, I will say in this case he effectively becomes a Nazir for 31 days. Nazir shloshim ve'echad yom she'ein naziros l'shos. Because I will say there is no such thing as a Nazir for hours. And I will say, now watch the difference over here between this Mishnah and the last Mishnah. Right? So I will say, so the way he was saying it, right. So I will say, in this case over here, if you notice, let me contrast it with the last Mishnah. The last Mishnah was, Harini Nazir v'yom echad, Harini Nazir v'sha'achas. So I will say, in that neder, remember, what is he adding in there? He's saying, Harini Nazir, I'm a Nazir, and then adding on a second period of time. So when you say Harini Nazir, and then a second period of time, the way the Mishnah interprets your phrase is you're saying two things. Number one, I'm taking on one neder Nazirus, Harini Nazir, and then what? I'm taking on a second neder Nazirus. Rabbi say, contrast that with this Mishnah. Harini Nazir Shloshim Yom V'Sha'achas. See, Rabbi say, in this case, what am I doing? I'm articulating the duration of a neder Nazirus plus additional time. When you articulate the duration of the neder Nazirus plus additional time, how do we interpret that? One neder Nazirus with a protracted time frame. So I say, I am a Nazir for 30 days and 1 hour. Okay, you're a 31-day Nazir. And I will say, by the way, this is what I mentioned before. Nazirus doesn't work in intervals of 30. It's just that the floor is 30 days. But once you go above 30, you could go ahead and say, I want to be a Nazir for 32 days, for 33 days, for 34 days, or for that matter, again, a Nazir for 30 days and an hour. Now, a Nazir for 30 days and an hour makes you a Nazir for how long? For 31 days. Incredible. So says the Gemara Amarav, Lo shanu ela da amar shloshim ve'echad yom. This is only true if you said 30 and 1 days. Right? Right? Aval amar shloshim yom v'yom echad Nazir shtayim. So Rabbi say this is very interesting. So Rabbi say, like all things in life, it's about how you say it. It's not just what you say; it's how you say it. So Rabbi say, now watch this. Rabbi say, now why is this? Because in this formulation, remember, you're linking the time frames together. Shloshim ve'echad yom, right? 31 days. But if you say I'm a Nazir for 30 days and 1 day, Rabbi say, how do we interpret that? Two independent nidrei nazirus. So we'll say that goes back to the previous Mishnah, which makes sense because now what you're doing is you see. We'll say again. Let's read it. The Gemara says, "V'Rav savar Rabbi Akiva the darish lishni yisera." We'll say before we get to this because Rav holds like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says whenever you say something unnecessary, see, I will say we assume that people don't say unnecessary words. Now that is quite an assumption, right? But Lamaisa, the idea over here is that when people say something, we attribute importance to their words. So I'll say this is incredible. So before we go on to Rav's proof, the idea over here is that Rav is making this fundamental distinction. I will say that this distinction is crucial to understanding the two Mishnayos, right? In the previous Mishnah, we had Hareini Nazir v'yom echad. Okay, so Rav says similarly again. So therefore, our Mishnah is saying is, if you say Hareini Nazir Shloshim Yom V'Shah Achos, okay, Hareini Nazir Shloshim Yom or Shloshim Ve'echad Yom, that works, 31 days. But if you say Hareini Nazir Shloshim Yom V'Yom Echad, 30 days and 1 day, why are you saying it like that? Right? That is an unnecessarily verbose way of articulating your neder nazirus. It must be that what are you doing? You're undertaking 2 periods of 30 days each. As opposed to, what Rav is saying is, whenever you could say something in a more streamlined, terse fashion, but instead you use a more verbose model, so you're coming to add in something. People don't say words for nothing. Therefore, again, if you wanted just to take on a 31-day neder naziros, you could have said, Hareini Nazir, Shloshim ve'echad yom. That's it. The fact that you say Shloshim Yom v'Yom Echad, that already tells us you're taking on 2 periods of Nidrei Naziros, two 30-day periods. Shabbos say, because Rav holds like Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva always darshans Lishni Yisera. Rabbi Akiva says whenever a person adds in something additional to their statement that they did not need to make, we interpret that additional piece as something meaningful. For example, what's an interesting case? This nan. Let's say if you sell a field, right? I sell a field to Ruvain. So what's the halacha? This nan, lo es habar, velo es hados. Now, what is actually very interesting. In general, when you sell real estate, not included in the sale of real estate is a bar. A bar is a pit, and a dos is a water cistern. It's fascinating, no? That again, we'll get to this. We'll get to these gemaras. We get to the Baba Basra, right? So whenever you sell real estate, automatically not included in the sale is the pit and the water cistern. So the words afapi shekasav lo umka veruma. Now, I will say, here's what's interesting. Even if when I sell my property to Ruvain, I write in the sale, Ruvain, I'm selling you my property, and everything again, it is depth and its height. So I would have thought depth, that should include the pit. And the cistern. V'tzarech likach lo derech divrei Rabbi Akiva. And I both say now the difference over here is something very interesting, which is that like this, even though not included in my sale is the pit and the water cistern, one little problem. I retain ownership to the pit and the water cistern, but what's the problem? I have no way to access it. So interestingly enough, I have to purchase a right of way. Right, the right of way. Fine, the Chum say, Ein tzarech likach lo derech. The Chum say no, you don't have to purchase right of way. Why? Because we'll say, obviously, if I automatically retain ownership over the pit and the cistern, then what? Obviously, I retain a right of way as well. Because what use to me is the pit and the cistern if I don't have a right of way? However, Umoda Rabbi Akiva agrees when it bisman she'omer lo chutz me'elu. So I will say, if I say, now again, so we'll say, so here's what's interesting. So in general, real estate law 101, I sell Reuben a field, automatically not included in that field is what? The bar and the dos, the pit and the cistern. But Rabbi Akiva says in general, I have to purchase back a right of way. However, Rabbi Akiva says, if in the sale I explicitly articulate that I'm not selling you the pit and the cistern, so we'll say, so why would I do that? Right? Do I need to articulate the pit and the cistern? Do I need to articulate that? No. But Rabbi Akiva holds if you go out of your way to articulate it, then it really means what am I holding back for myself? Right of way. So because Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that people don't say things for no reason. So I didn't need to say chutz me'elu. I didn't need to say except for the pit and the cistern, because it's understood in every real estate transaction that when I sell on the property, I'm not including the pit and the cistern. So when I say chutz me'elu, what am I retaining for myself? And Rabbi Akiva will say, what am I retaining for myself? Right of way. Right of way. Then we'll say, what does this have to do with our sugya? Absolutely nothing, except for the fact that Rav holds like Rabbi Akiva. So therefore we'll say, Rav holds that whenever people add in what appears to be unnecessary wording into their statements or stipulations, it's never unnecessary. They're coming to convey something else. So Rav will say like this. Rav will say, when a guy says, I am a Nazir for 30 days and 1 day, why are you saying that? That's unnecessary. You could have just said what? I am a Nazir for 31 days. Well, if you didn't say I'm a Nazir for 31 days, but instead you said I'm a Nazir for 30 days and 1 day, we understand that when people say stuff, they never say stuff for unnecessary reasons. Therefore what? You must be taking on an additional Neder Naziros. For 30 days is one Neder Naziros, and the additional day is, as opposed to, I will say, if you say 31 days, or like the Mishnah said, Nazir, 30 days and 1 hour, that's considered to be a 31-day Nazir. So I will say, this is how the Rama Paskins, Hilchos Naziros, Parak Gimel, same Parak, Halacha Zayin, Haomer, Hareini Nazir Sha'achos, Harezi Nazir Shloshim Yom. Shabbos, listen to this. So again, if a person says, you see, the Rabban points this case, the Mishnah doesn't say this case, I'm a Nazir for 1 hour. Shabbos says, what happens if you have a Nazir for 1 hour? There's no such thing as a Naziros for hours. So therefore, again, you say 1 hour. What have you done? 30 days. Similarly, Omer Nazir, Shlosh Yom V'Sha'achos. If you say you're a Nazir for 30 days and 1 hour, Harei Nazir Echad Shloshim Yom. Ultimately, again, you are a Nazir for 31 days. Notice, however, with Ram Pasuk like the Rav, if you say Shloshim Yom V'Yom Echad, Shloshim Yom, I'm a Nazir for 30 days and 1 day. How long are you a Nazir for? 60 days, 2 periods of 30 each. Ultimately, again, because Rav says the fact that you worded this in an unnecessary, right, elongated fashion indicates to us that you are not taking on one Neder Naziris, but rather taking on 2 consecutive Neder Naziris. So both say, Shkoyach.